What makes a skill effective? That it produces the desired results. In motorcycle racing, this means getting better lap times, getting to turn one first, passing the guy in front of you. In 2022, I went almost coast to coast here in the US, racing in both local and national supermoto races. Throughout the season, I got a lot of great tips from racers and coaches. I've then taken this laundry list of skills that I learned from them and combined them into what I think are the 20 most effective motorcycle racing skills. To make this video easy to follow and to reference later if you so wish, I've split it up into different sections. So we'll walk through braking, turn-in, mid-corner, exit, launching, general motorcycle skills, and motorcycle setup. So let's get started with skill number 1. Light brake to out brake. So what do I mean by light brake, out brake? What I mean is you're going to start braking a little bit earlier than what you're used to, but you're only going to be applying a small amount of brake pressure. And then you're going to carry the brakes far into the corner. You'll release the brakes once the bike is pointed. The opposite of light braking is to brake really hard, really late. When you do this, sometimes the bike may get really upset and squirmy, and it's going to take a while to gather the bike back up and get it turned into the corner. This may make you slower in those corners. Skill number 2, time the rear brake to the corner. Some corners benefit a lot from backing it in to the corner, meaning sliding the rear so that the bike turns around and we can get on the throttle a lot earlier because the bike is pointed towards the exit. So what do I mean by time the rear brake? Well, what I mean is, for most corners where you're not going to be sliding the rear, you're going to be applying the rear brake first and then applying the front brake. You'll use mostly the front brake to slow the bike down, and then once you're in the corner, you're going to release the front and rear brake roughly at the same time. In corners where you want to really steer the bike by sliding the rear, you're going to be applying the rear brake first and then the front brake, but you'll use a lot more brake pressure on the rear. And you might even release the rear before you release the front. This is so that you can slide the bike to where you want it, and then you'll release the rear to get the rear hooked back up. Then you'll carry the front just a little bit further so that the bike gets pointed, and then you'll get on the throttle. This leads nicely into skill number 3. Use the rear brake for stability. So when we apply the rear brake before applying the front brake, this is going to stabilize the bike because it slows down the load transfer forward on the bike. Look at this clip with instructors from Champ School showing how this works. Speaking of stability and being smooth, now let's talk about skill number 4, braking in the rain. Racing in the rain is something that you're going to have to do at some point if you're serious about racing. Even here in California, it sometimes rains when we race. So how do we brake in the rain? Well, it's actually one of those things that is ridiculously simple, but it seems like a lot of racers haven't heard about this before, or they may not be convinced that this is actually how it works. So braking in the rain is as simple as you can brake as hard as you can in a straight line in the rain as you can in the dry. But when you turn in, you have to release more brake pressure than what you usually do when you turn in the dry. What this means practically is that you have to adopt a more point-and-shoot riding style when you're racing in the rain. Skill number 5, use G-forces to move. Something that's really important to conserve when you're racing is energy. And when you're moving around on the bike, you're using up a lot of that energy. So in order to minimize your usage of that energy, using G-forces to move around on the bike can be really helpful. The main place I use G-forces to move around on the bike is when I'm going from a long straight braking into a corner. Skill number 6, quick versus linear turn-in. Something you must have experienced if you have a lot of track day experience is that if you're braking really hard for a corner and maintain that brake pressure when you're trying to turn in, it's really hard to get the bike to lean over. If you release a lot of brake pressure and then turn in, it is a lot easier and faster to get the bike to turn in. Long, fast corners usually benefit from a more linear turn-in, where you can carry more brake pressure into the corner. Whereas shorter corners sometimes benefit from releasing a lot of brake pressure, getting the bike turned over, and then getting on the throttle early on. Try experimenting with using more or less brake pressure going into corners. And you'll soon find that some corners benefit from a quick turn-in and others benefit from a linear turn-in. Now let's talk about mid-corner. Skill number 7. Maintenance throttle is not bad. This is a skill that I learned from Champ School. So many of you must have heard that once you release the brakes and you start rolling on the throttle, you should roll the throttle constantly throughout the corner. Or in other words, you should accelerate constantly throughout the corner. Champ School teaches that once you've gotten the bike pointed, you should go to maintenance throttle, or throttle that maintains your speed and corner radius. And then, once you can remove lean angle, you accelerate out from the corner. Sometimes this means that you must hold that maintenance throttle for quite some time. Other times it means that you hold it only for a brief moment to then accelerate out from the corner. The reason that the technique of braking until the bike is pointed and then going to maintenance throttle works so well is because it works independently of how you go into the corner. So if you go wide, you do the same thing. Brake until the bike is pointed, go to maintenance throttle until you can remove lean angle. The same thing if you take too tight of a line, and the same thing if there's other riders in front of you messing up your line. Skill number 8, stay outside. Stay outside refers to staying wide in the corner while being on the brakes. This is going to enable you to point the bike towards the exit much earlier as compared to if you were further to the inside in the corner. This is something that I need to work on a lot myself, because I tend to shoot for the inside of the corner way too early. The way I've been fixing this is by going out on practice sessions doing roughly 75% of my usual pace. I then force myself to stay wide in the corners, taking that perfect racing line that I want. And then I simply increase the pace while keeping that line in check. Skill number 9, take a coffee. This is a skill I learned from Tony Elias. Take a coffee refers to going slow in a corner where you could technically go faster, but you're carrying less speed in order to get a perfect line in another section of the track. This perfect line means that you can carry more speed and more throttle in that section. So the way that you figure out where you should be taking a coffee on a track is by looking at a top view of the track. Then draw a late apex line out onto the straights of that track. Then you simply need to figure out how you can get onto that line. Now let's talk about the exit. Skill number 10, be first to max throttle. This is something that I learned from Chris at Champ School, and that is to be the first one to get to max throttle and not to be the first one to start rolling on the throttle. This is connected to being light on the brakes to get the bike pointed inside of the corner, and not being afraid of using maintenance throttle inside of the corner until we can remove lean angle. By being the first one to get to max throttle, you're going to see a benefit on the long straights, where at the end of the straight you're going to be carrying more speed than if you start rolling on the throttle a little bit earlier, but then have to spend a lot of time getting to max throttle. Skill number 11, no grip, be 1 gear higher. If there's a corner on track where you're struggling on the exit, where the bike is really uncontrolled, sliding around and snaking on the exit, you should be 1 gear higher on the exit of that corner. So if you usually shift down 3 times for that corner, try shifting down only twice. This means that you're going to be in a less than optimum part of the rev range, but you're going to be able to get hard on the throttle on that exit, without the bike getting all squirmy and uncontrolled underneath you. So this usually means more speed and thus reduced lap times. Skill number 12, screwdriver throttle roll. If you have a lot of track day experience, I'm sure you've heard before that you should hold onto the throttle like you're holding a screwdriver. This releases the elbow and enables you to push your upper body further to the inside of the corner. But the biggest benefit, in my opinion, is that it gives you much more fine-tuned control of the throttle roll when you're exiting the corner. Skill number 13, move forward for anti-wheelie. You may have heard before that wheelies are the enemy of speed. And this is really true, because when the bike is wheeling, it is really hard to control its trajectory. One of the ways you can stop the bike from wheeling is by moving forward on the bike. Usually there are a couple of places on tracks where the bike is going to be really prone to wheeling. It might be in a downhill or it might be over a bump. So you have to time your move forward with this obstacle on the track. Now let's talk about the start. Skill number 14, how to launch a motorcycle. Launching a motorcycle is easier than you may think, but a lot of people struggle with this because they don't understand the fundamentals. So the fundamentals are, you should be sitting far forward on the bike. You should then roll the throttle to somewhere in the middle of the rev range. You then need to release the clutch almost all the way out to where it's just not grabbing. Then, when the flag goes up, the lights go out, or whatever way you're starting with, you drop the clutch entirely and roll the throttle simultaneously as you're dropping the clutch. That's it. That's how easy it is to launch a motorcycle. Some really powerful motorcycles may require you to roll the throttle a bit less initially, but the technique is still the same. Skill number 15, have a plan. The start is the most unpredictable part of a motorcycle race, but you still have to have some type of a plan of what you're going to do in terms of which side you're going to go of the rider in front of you because of your new epic launching skills, and where you're going to position yourself into turn 1 and turn 2 of that race. You don't want to end up picking a side to go to after you have launched and the rider in front of you is stalling. You have to pick the side before this happens. Skill number 16, time the pass. This is something that I struggled a lot with when I started out racing. So timing the pass simply means that in order to pass someone that is a bit slower than yourself, you have to keep a bit of a distance to them until you pick a specific spot to pass them. If you stay right on the rear wheel and just follow them around, you're never going to find a spot to pass them because every time they brake, you have to brake a little bit harder in order to not hit them. Skill number 17, get a tug. One of the quickest ways to improve your lap times at any track is to shadow a better rider. Sometimes you can do this during practice before the races, or you have to do it during the race itself. This is why you often see MotoGP riders being really slow in qualification, but then all of a sudden being super fast during the race. They are looking at the riders' lines in front of them and learning where they can improve. This is why racing improves riding skills much faster than just going to track days and going round and round lap after lap. The mentality that I use out on track shadowing faster riders is that if my motorcycle is set up correctly and I have the right tire pressures, then there's no reason I shouldn't be able to carry the same corner speed and brake at the same times as this faster rider. This way of thinking has helped me improve my corner speed significantly. Skill number 18, racing line equals adaptive line. When you're racing, it becomes obvious that you're not going to be able to take the same line as you did in qualifying because there's other riders around you. And sometimes in order to pass a rider in front of you, you have to take a line which is going to be slower in lap time, but enables you to pass them and then block them in the next corner. This comes back to the fundamental skill of using the brakes to point the bike inside of the corner. If you understand this, you can approach any corner from anywhere and always get the bike pointed out from the corner and accelerate out. Now let's talk about a very important topic: motorcycle setup. Skill number 19, weight bias and tire temperatures. There are many aspects of setting up a motorcycle, but the two most important ones to get right are weight bias and tire temperatures. So weight bias is the weight distribution on the motorcycle, or in other words, how much you're loading up the front or the rear when you're riding around on the track. And tire temperatures is simply how close the tires are to their optimum operating temperature when you're riding on the track. So in order to set up weight bias, the first thing you need to do is get the correct spring rates for your weight. You can often find this in user manuals, but if you don't have it in your manual, call a local suspension guy and ask him what spring rate you should be using for your bike and your weight. Once you have the correct spring rates in the front forks and the rear shock, you need to set up the rider sag. The rider sag is how much the suspension compresses when you sit on the bike as compared to their fully extended state. This usually needs to be 1/3 of that fully extended state. The reason that it's so important to set the spring rate and sag correctly is because this is going to put the bike's weight distribution exactly where the engineers who designed the bike intended it to be. So if the bike was designed to have a 50-50 weight distribution, this is what you're going to have if you've set the spring rate and sag correctly. So what this means in practice is, say that you have a too soft spring and too much sag in the rear. This means that you're putting too much load on the rear tire, and it's going to make the front tire want to understeer in corners. This is going to feel like the front tire wants to push out from the corner. Vice versa, if you have too soft springs and too much sag in the front forks, this is going to make the bike oversteer, so it's going to make the bike feel very twitchy when you get on the throttle out of the corners. Okay, so we have a baseline for the suspension setup. Now it's time to tackle the tires. So the tire temperatures are a crucial part of getting grip when you're racing on a track. And the tire temperature is largely affected by the tire pressures. In order to get to the right tire temperatures, or in other words, the optimum operating temperatures of the tires when you're out there on the track, you're going to do this simple trick. When you come back from your session out on the track, take off your glove and put your hand on the front and rear tire. If you can keep your hand on the tire without having to remove it because it's too hot, it likely means that your tires are a bit too cold. This means that you should be reducing the tire pressures. If the tires are so hot when you come back that you can barely hold your hand on them, it either means that you are roughly in the ballpark of where they need to be, or they're overheating slightly. If they're overheating, you need to put a little bit more pressure back into the tires. But this brings us to skill number 20, reading tires. I'm sure entire books could be written about reading tires. However, I'm going to give you the very simple and straightforward version that I use in order to read my tires. So simply put, you're looking for if the tires are overheating or if you have cold tears. You can see the difference by a cold tear having large chunks in a very local area being removed from the tire. A overheating tire often has smaller chunks of the tire coming off and then going off to the sides of the tire. That's pretty much all that I do in terms of reading tires, and I don't really need more than that. I hope these 20 skills can help you become a faster and safer rider out there on the racetrack. Remember to subscribe to my channel. There is always something new to learn.
It's gotta be against the law to look this damn good. Cause baby, I feel real good and I wish I would. gotta be against the law to look this damn good. Everybody watch out.